All right, hello everybody. It's good to connect with all of you via the social media and technology. We were looking forward to being able to do this in person and to meet some of you and maybe connect with those that we do know. Unfortunately, with this COVID-19, we're kind of stuck to video, but that's okay because we're still able to get something that we want to share with you to you. So we hope that you find this talk and this video to be kind of some light and inspiration even during this tough time. Just to kind of start with introductions, my name is Dan Pfannenstein. This is my wife Heather, and we're going to be going on 6 years of being married, and we have 2 children. Matthias, he's our oldest at 4.5, and we just had Ella, who is going to be just a little over 4 months, and so those are our 2 kids. I'll kind of get into maybe just a little introduction of myself, and then I'll pass it on to Heather, and she can give a little introduction of herself. I grew up in Rockville, Minnesota. My folks, Steve and Sandy Pfannenstein. I have one younger sister who is 2 years younger than myself, Megan, and it was in Rockville all my life. I went to school, the Rocori School District. I ended up going to college in St. Cloud, at St. Cloud Technical and Community College, and I ultimately ended up working at Cold Spring Granite, formerly now known as Cold Spring, and I started off doing drafting there, and I am now in the sales end of things, and so now I'm a regional sales manager for Cold Spring. So I was a parishioner at Mary of the Immaculate Conception Church in Rockville, and I went to school back, kind of relating to college. I went to school for architectural construction technology, and basically got a background in construction. So architecture, drawing, design, interior, exterior design, estimating, project management. So that's kind of my field of study. And like I said, that led me into my job at Cold Spring, and then ultimately ended up taking a little bit of a different path in sales. So that's kind of a little background of me and who I am, and I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I'm Heather, like he said, and I grew up a bit of everywhere. I was born in Nebraska, and my dad is an Assembly of God pastor, and so growing up we moved around a bit, and I grew up in Nebraska and South Dakota, and then my high school years we ended up in Marshall, Minnesota, and I was able to do high school from 9th through 12th grade and graduate from there. And then after high school I went to St. Cloud State University, and I pursued my K through 12 music elementary license for teaching, and then from there I took my first job in Brainerd, Minnesota, and I taught K through 4 music for 9 years. And last year in August I accepted a position, and now I am the principal at St. Peter and Paul School in Richmond, Minnesota, and I do have my principal license and my master's in administration and leadership. That was a passion of mine as well with music, and so I pursued that. And a big part of our story is what we're calling our unexpected journey, and it's our testimony, and it's how pursuing God in our life and our marriage has continued to open doors that we did never expect. And it kind of started a bit with me in my personal life, and then it's bled through into our marriage and into our jobs, and it continues to lead us, and God continues to be the author of our story and our life, and it really is unexpected, but it's beautiful. My full testimony is in the book, By His Mercy 2, Living All In. So if you'd like to read the full testimony, it is in there, but we will share with you a lot of it today as well.
Yeah, really this is, it kind of started off as Heather's testimony, and you'll see kind of why and how that kind of incorporates, but obviously I'm involved in a part of it as well, so yay, I get to be here too. But really, with focusing especially on Divine Mercy Sunday, which is what this is all about. It's some reflections and some time to reflect on Divine Mercy Sunday. We really feel like this fit in well with that, because really when we call upon the Lord and we let Him to truly guide us and bring us along into journeys, sometimes it can be unexpected, but we can find His mercy, His love, His forgiveness, and His fruits in all of it, as long as we're just willing to listen. So I think what we'll just probably do is just get into the story, and I'll let you kind of start with it. And we're just going to kind of riff back and forth as far as the story. So if we interrupt each other, that's okay. So, we'll start.
Well, it really started back in 2007 when I was in St. Cloud State University as my music major, piano and voice were my major. And I was asked if I was interested in being the piano accompanist for Mary of the Immaculate Conception in Rockville, Minnesota. And I said I would be interested in inquiring about it and finding out more. And so they passed my number along, and the choir director called me and did a very short phone interview and said, yeah, we really want you to be our piano accompanist. And I said, I've never honestly been to a Catholic service except once, and it was a funeral. I know nothing about the Catholic Mass. I can play your music, so if that's okay with you, I'm in. And he said, yeah, we absolutely need you, so that's just fine. I can teach you the rest. I can teach you the Mass and how that works. And so I said, okay. And so I started as their piano accompanist and for their choir. And we met every Monday, and I played every Sunday. And in the choir is when I got the chance to get to know Dan. And it turns out that his dad, Steve Pfannenstein, was the director of the choir. And so we just kept, really, there was nothing there. At the time, I was actually dating somebody else, and I had been dating them for about 3 years. And so, I met Dan, it was friendly, but there was not really, anything that we thought would ever come of that at the time. And so as I continued to play, the first year I did not do the Christmas services with them, and I went home. And at the time, my parents were living back in Nebraska. And I saw that was really difficult on Steve and the choir because they did not have a piano accompanist, and finding a fill-in was a lot of hard work. And so the following year I said, I will stay back and I will play for your Christmas services all the way through. I won't go home for Christmas until later. And Steve said, are you sure? I said, absolutely. You've hired me to do this. I cared so much about the choir and the relationship that Steve and I had built working together. And so anyway, I said, yeah, I would stay. And then, the following week at rehearsal, Steve asked me, he said, I talked to my family and they would be really okay with it. Would you be willing to come over for Christmas and join us for our Christmas Eve dinner and join us so you aren't alone? And I said, well, that would be great. I'd really appreciate it. My parents, of course, like I said, are in Nebraska, and I have one older brother, and he at the time was in Burnsville, and he was going to college there too. And I know other relatives in this area. So I said, I would really enjoy that.
Yeah, so to kind of back up a little, my mom and dad were very, very involved in the parish in Rockville. My mom was the secretary for a long time, and my dad was the choir director there as well for quite a long time. And they also did all the liturgical decorating as well. So as children, we were really brought up in a very active kind of way within the church. And so I was involved in a lot of that and helped with a lot of that, and was very, very excited about my faith, about the church. I was involved in our youth group all the way through college, or all the way out through high school, I should say. And when college came, I went to church and I was still part of the choir. And so I still, came every Sunday, and it was important enough for me to do that. But that's kind of where things were left off. I really wasn't, outside of Sundays, really pursuing the Lord at all. And I wasn't doing an additional reading, and, it was just basically the Sunday thing. And so that's why I was part of the choir and how I met Heather. But again, like she said, at the time I wasn't really dating anybody. I hadn't had any significant or serious relationships really since high school and kind of the very early part of college. And that was kind of the last time. And so since then, I really didn't have any significant, or serious relationships. And so when I seen Heather, I was interested, and then quickly knew that she was dating somebody. So it was kind of like, wrote that off right off the bat. But so when I had found out that my dad had basically extended the invitation to Heather to come over for Christmas, I thought, wow, this is probably going to be pretty intimidating for her to come to a whole family that she doesn't even really know. And so, again, good social media. I looked her up on Facebook and sent her a message, and she did respond, and we ended up getting together for coffee. And I had no intentions. I seriously just wanted to get together just to visit with her, just to kind of allow her to get to know myself and maybe a little bit about her family, so that when she came over for Christmas, it was going to be a little bit, maybe a little more welcoming and not as awkward. So we ended up gathering. We had coffee, and we had kind of a long, extended evening of conversation, and really it was that 3-4 hours went by pretty fast, and it was a good conversation. It was just very natural, very easygoing, and we ended the conversation, and then that was kind of that. The next kind of thing was going to be the holidays, and so I'll let you take it from there.
Well, what he didn't know was I was actually already in the midst of the relationship I was in was not in a healthy place, and it was already coming to an end. And actually at that time, before we even went out for coffee, it was ended. And he didn't know that, and I didn't bring it up because that wasn't his intentions, and I knew that, and it wasn't my intentions either. Although we found out that night that talking became really easy and natural between us, and there was definitely a spark there that was pretty undeniable. And after that, we just kept communicating and kept kind of talking. And then of course, I did let him know that the relationship was not there. I wanted him to know that, so there wasn't question of, am I talking to someone who's with someone in a serious relationship, and then I did end up going actually for Thanksgiving and Christmas because, we were enjoying each other's company that much. And then we did start dating shortly after that. And it progressed, and we found out that we had a lot of interests and a lot of things in common. And, several years actually went by, and we became very serious in our relationship. And we started talking about what it would be like to be married and what that looks like for our lives. And the biggest thing that came up for us that, you start evaluating in your life is what that looks like for your life, but then for your family and for your kids. And in our conversations, it came up, well, where would we go to church, and where would we raise our family, and what happens with kids? And so our conversation about backgrounds clearly came up. And, as Dan said, he grew up Catholic, and my dad was an Assembly of God pastor and still is to this day. And so I grew up and was baptized in the Assembly of God churches, and I have an absolute beautiful heritage. My parents live the most amazing, beautiful life of Christ and love and faith, and showing that relationship in everything they do and what they say. And that was really instilled in me from a very young girl. And I carried that very closely in my heart all the way through college. And when I played at the Catholic Church, I always went to church before that, and I would go to my own church service, and then I would go and play for the Catholic Church. My faith and my background and my heritage was very, very important to me, and it still is. So we started having these conversations. Well, what does this look like? And do you stay Catholic, and do I stay Assembly of God? And what does that mean for our kids? And whose church do we go to? And do we take turns? And do we go back and forth? And we had a lot of different conversations, and they were very difficult. They turned out to be conversations that we found out really actually divided us and didn't bring us together. And it was a very emotional time, and it was a very difficult time for us. And it became so serious that we did break up after 3-4 years of dating. And 4 years of dating. And we did break up, and we did say, we cannot find an agreement on that. And there's a lot of areas we were willing to find compromise and to meet in the middle, but this wasn't one of them. Dan said, no, I really believe that I need to be a part of the Catholic Church. That's my calling. And I said, that's not where I belong. I'm where I belong. And we could not find a center for us.
So through that period of time, I was becoming very conflicted myself. Again, with not really being incredibly active in Catholicism and my faith, and just on Sundays, kind of attending Mass, I kind of was leaning back and forth, and I was, hearing kind of well, as long as you believe in Jesus, that's really what matters, right? And that is a big piece, and that's the foundation of everything. And so I kind of was like, well, maybe I could become an Assembly of God member and not, practice Catholicism and stuff, and that's really shouldn't be that big of a deal. And so I actually even left the Catholic Church for a few months because I was doing both, and I was kind of like, well, is one fulfilling me and not fulfilling me? And I was just getting very confused. And again, it was a lot of back and forth, even between Heather and myself, in these, years of dating. And there was times of great pain. There was times of great argument and hurt. And it was pretty rough at some points. But so I thought, you know what, that's it. I'm going to try for a few months to just, go to the Assembly of God. And I just didn't attend. I attended Bible studies, and I attended the services and tried to get to know families and people. And I just tried to go all in on it. And I was basically very quickly realizing that for me, something that I was longing for and missing was the Eucharist. It was just something that was very apparent to me right off the bat, that not receiving that on a regular weekly basis was becoming very difficult for me. And so I went to kind of a men's retreat, and through kind of an acquaintance and through going to a Bible study, because of during our time of being split up, I was just trying to reach out and try to find some people because I was a wreck. I was a mess when we were not together. I was not in a good place. It was not a healthy, good place at all. And so I went to this men's retreat, and during one of the times of adoration, I went to adoration, and I came back to our bed in our little area that we had. And I found my Bible open, and I don't remember opening it to this, and I found my Bible open to John chapter 6, basically the Bread of Life discourse. And I read that and read that and read that over and over again that evening. And I just knew in my heart that God was truly calling me to remain Catholic, and to take it seriously, to own it, and to raise my family as Catholics. And so basically kind of moving to the next part, I got together actually very quickly after that men's retreat with Heather. We had still been talking, and like I said, it was a back and forth. And I basically proposed to her, and I said, listen, I know I need to remain Catholic, and I'm not expecting that you ever become Catholic, and we will do whatever we need to make sure that we're both being fulfilled within our backgrounds and our upbringings. But I said, I need to remain Catholic, and I want to get married in the church and raise our children Catholic. That's just the important part for me. And if we can't move forward with that, then this is just kind of got to be the end. But if you feel peace, if you feel like that is something that you can do and that you feel right about, then I think we need to also move forward, only in a different way. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is the first time that really, prior when we always had conversations, it always turned into an argument and a fight. It really did. We're pretty strong-willed, each of us, and we were very defensive about our upbringings and our backgrounds, and rightly so, and because we believed in them very strongly. But it was basically the first time that I think you kind of had a peace about it when we talked.
Yeah, well, and at this time we were talking, like he said, but we were not together. I was living in Brainerd and working, and he was living in Cold Spring and still working here. And, we took this time apart to really search what God wanted for our lives. And we didn't know that of each other. When we broke up, because it was so difficult, we really did not talk or have anything to do with each other for several months. And I did not know what Dan was doing, and he did not know what I was doing. It turns out after we did start talking again, what we found out was, we both, instead of looking for our meaning in life elsewhere, we both really took a focus on God, and stronger than we ever had before. Like really just a call of help and a call of guidance and of God's mercy, and a lot of prayer and a lot of fasting. And it was mine personal life. It was very intense, and it was very real, and it was a really time of sorrow. And it actually was during Lent, which at the time I wasn't observing. And same for Dan. I found out, I had no idea that this was a time he was taking to do a lot of prayer and a lot of sermon, a lot of fasting. Again, not just the normal amount, but in a very deep and a very serious way that was very often. And, so when we started talking, the conversations, of course, became very centered around this really is contingent upon one thing in our lives. And so when Dan came to me that day, and we still knew we wanted to be together. We knew that we loved each other. That was never the question. We knew we wanted to be together if we could figure out this. Otherwise, we knew, like he said, this really had to come to an end. It was not healthy for us or productive. And so when he said that, that was really the very first day when you could just feel the Holy Spirit and the peace and the presence in our midst. And when he said that, I had complete peace. And I don't know why, except to say that it was really a God moment for our lives. It was a time where God allowed our hearts to be open and soft enough to communicate with love and without fighting and without being defensive. And when he said that, I said, Dan, I said, I have been doing a lot of soul searching, and I have really been trying to open up my heart to God and what his will is and what I thought God's will was for my life. I thought I really knew. And, but in this moment, I also knew that God was directing me to spend my life with Dan. And I said to Dan, I will marry you. We can get married in the Catholic Church. I said, I will never become Catholic. And I said, but I am okay with raising.
Which she was pretty adamant about.
It wasn't like if. I said, I will never become Catholic. And I said, I will raise our family. I will support us, because I said, what I don't want is I don't want our kids confused. I don't want our kids questioning, well, which way do we go? Do we go to mom's or do we go to dad's? I said, no. I said, I won't become Catholic, but we'll raise our family and I'll support you in that. But you also have to support my background as well. And he said, yes, absolutely, I will respect you. And so, we moved forward. We had a year-long engagement. We got married the next year, November 8th, 2014. And it was beautiful. We got married in St. Mary's Cathedral, which is our home church. And it was a wonderful, beautiful day. Father Tony was an instrumental person in our life and in our marriage and in our engagement, and especially with me, and just allowing my heart to continuously open to experience that relationship with God and Christ in the Catholic Church. And Father Tony also developed a really close relationship with my dad, and my dad being a pastor, they both jointly did our wedding ceremony. And it was a really beautiful day that combined my heritage and Dan's in uniting us towards our future and what we had hoped and dreamed for.
Yeah, so there was some really beautiful moments, that kind of just started coming together during that time. I had been active at St. Mary's for a couple years prior, to that. And so getting to kind of know people at St. Mary's and creating kind of a family there. It was kind of the first parish that I got involved with outside of my home parish growing up as a child. And so when we started, the preparations and things of that nature for our wedding, like Heather had mentioned, Father Tony and just, Eileen Farrell, who was the choir director there, both just amazingly instrumental people in our walk. They truly were. They took us in when we needed people. They showed us love. They showed us grace, love, and mercy as well. And they were just living examples of Christ in the midst of us. And they really helped that process, even though that was kind of difficult at times, and made it something incredible and beautiful. And so, we got married. It was a beautiful day in so many ways. It was perfect. It was ideal in every absolute way. And from there, God kind of started stirring in a different way.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
God really did. I was fully welcomed in the Catholic Church, like he said, through Father Tony, and then through Eileen, but then also through Father Scott. And everyone really welcomed me, and I was a part of the choir, and everyone knew I wasn't Catholic, but no one cared, and they all treated me the same, and they were just so loving, and there was no pressure at all to be anything. And that was one thing that was really important to me. It was that even with Dan, Dan never ever pressured me, and he never expected me to again agree to something I hadn't agreed to when we became married, but Dan does have a love and a passion for the Catholic Church and its history and what it is, and we have a passion for Christ and that relationship in our lives. And so our conversations were very often about God and church and life. And through conversations, knowledge grew, and interest grew, and my heart became more open, and it became even softer and less even judgmental. And there was a stirring in my heart. And it was shortly after we were married, and we were in Mass, and I will never forget, it was always the most beautiful thing. We were in the choir, which is in the back of the cathedral, and the men are on one side and the women are on the other side. And during the Eucharist, Father Tony always took it up and held it up as they do, but he always turned very intentionally to both sides of the choir. And he would often even look and just give me that smile of assurance of, you're okay, and it was one Sunday morning, and he turned and he very intentionally presented that to both sides of the choir. And at that moment, I absolutely heard God, and it was in an audible voice, something I've never ever experienced before, something I've never experienced since, and it was as clear as day. And God just said to me, "Heather, come to my table." And honestly, it was like, did I just hear what I thought I heard? And I, in my heart, I said, no, and then he said it again, "Heather, come to my table." And I get emotional because it was so real. And I said, "No, I am not ready. I can't do that yet." And he said it one more time, and he said, "Heather, come to my table." And I said, "Okay, God, I will." I said, "But I will do it after our first child." I made a deal with God because Dan and I were planning to wait with our family and giving it a few years, because I had some goals of finishing my master's and starting that. And so I thought, gosh, that gives me 2-3 years at least, so we'll be okay. Never make a deal with God, he always wins. And seriously, you guys, a month later, I was pregnant, and it was not planned, and it was really God. And it was one of those moments where, you trust God with your life and your future, and God said, "Okay, here you go, Heather." And I thought, oh no. And I never told Dan about that for months, actually. So I told Dan I was pregnant, and then in my head I'm thinking, okay, I know what I told God, but I'm just going to keep that between us for now. And I don't even know how long I waited, but it was several months before I ever shared that with Dan, because in my heart I just needed to sit with that and discern what that was. And it was big. I knew it was very serious.
Yeah, so at this point, by this time, Father Scott Pogachnik was the rector at the cathedral, and we began to gain a really strong relationship with him. He's a phenomenal priest, a phenomenal friend of ours. And when kind of Heather finally told me about this and explained the situation, there was kind of an urgency, to join, because Heather was really feeling the calling to experience Christ in the Eucharist and his real presence in that. Yeah. And it became painful for her not to be involved with that. And so we reached out to Father Scott and just said, is there any way that we can, do something, or what would be the process, what kind of time frame we would be looking at? And so with this being shortly after Christmas, and Easter only a few months away, Father put together kind of a program and worked with some of the staff and went through RCIA and kind of a shortened version of it, but we went through that together, and thanks be to God, that Easter, Heather came into the church fully.
And like Dan said, that's really what it became really painful. It's, first of all, you can't walk away from God's will without pain. And so the longer I put it off, the more turmoil my heart became in the sense of not questioning it. I knew it 100%, but it was, that longing, that pain of, I am not in line with God. I'm not following his will. I'm not going where he wants me to. And I am missing something that God is offering me. And it did become very painful. In fact, the Eucharist at that point clearly for me became something that was very real, and the real presence of Christ. And I knew I wanted to partake in that, and I knew I did want to come to his table. And though I always believed there was great power in being among his presence in the Catholic Church when there is the Eucharist and the Blessed Sacrament, and I knew that, I knew that space and that presence was very real and very special, and something that I could only experience in the Catholic Church. But I wanted more. I wanted to partake in the bread and in the cup. And so I did. I became Catholic, and it was a really wonderful day. And my family continued to be supportive, and they were there, and they stood with me and alongside me. And, this has really become for us what our marriage was. When we said we got married, we wanted to unite us and our backgrounds and show how God is a God of unity and not a God of division. And God has been that for us. We are very close with my family. We respect my parents and who they are, and they respect us, and we support each other. They come to our church, and they come to special services and to Christmas Eve and all sorts of things, and we go to theirs, and we partake in their church as well, and supporting them and with their music. And our families have become united, and as well as even our parents, and a relationship that they have developed. So it was a goal of ours when we got married, and God has continued to bring fruit of that we never expected. And now we have 2 kids, and they are both baptized in the Catholic Church, and we are Catholic and proud of it, and we love it. And the unexpected journey is that through all this, 10 years ago, in 2007, 13 years ago, I would have never told you in my life that I would have married a Catholic, for one. I would have ever became Catholic, raised my family. And then, as you continue to always draw near to God, and that's how we have lived, is that we keep trying to ask God, what do you want for our lives, and where do you want us to go? God opens doors that you never expected. And within that, 2 years ago, I finished my master's in education, administration and leadership, and my K-12 principal license. And I've loved working in the public schools. I was there for 9 years, and it was a great experience. And I loved being able to be a light of Christ to the public schools and to the students and to the teachers and in my work environment. And I never expected to leave that. I did want to become, a principal and pursue that. That was always an ambition of mine. And, about a year ago, when I was looking for those jobs and for those positions, actually, it wasn't even me. It was some people around me, some mentors of mine who I respect, said, Heather, there's some Catholic schools open. Have you looked at them? And I said, no, I haven't looked at them. I mean, I'm Catholic. I love being Catholic, but no, I was set. Like, this is where I belong. And they said, I really think you need to look at them. And I thought, really? Wow. Okay, fine. So I actually put my resume in for St. Peter and Paul School. And I really didn't think much of it. But then during that short amount of time, God always has a way of sparking. So then some more interest came with some things we were reading, and just starting to think about our children and their future and what school looks like for children and the struggle that could be in a public school with the way the world is going. And I thought, yeah, I've never thought of it quite the same. It changes when you have children. And I thought, you're right. I don't know if I would want my kids in a public school. There's nothing wrong with it. I respect public schools, but there is a beauty in having a Christ-centered education. And so it was really the first time that God really started stirring that in my heart. And a long story short, I went through and I got an interview. And during that whole process, it was one of those things where God continues to stir in my heart and to continue to lay out steps of showing me his plan. And, and I clearly did take the job, and it has been a most fantastic position. I love my school, and we've absolutely loved being back in the area because for us, we were commuting and we were living in Little Falls, and I was driving up to Brainerd and Dan was driving down here to Cold Spring, and we did that for 5 years, and we were very ready to be done. We needed it for our family, and it gave us opportunity to be here. And now I can't imagine ever not being in a Catholic school. And it just goes back to, I say it over and over, that when we allow God to be the author of our story, he writes it in a way we don't expect. But it is more beautiful than we could have ever imagined. I could never have imagined a life this beautiful that God has blessed us with. But I'm so thankful every day for all the blessings he's given Dan and I and our families and our children and our careers and our the callings that God has given us to our careers as well, and our lives of living our Catholic faith.
Yeah, and so it's been pretty cool to see God work in all those moments, and they haven't been easy. Sometimes it's been a real struggle, and will continue to be. I mean, relationships, and whether it's family relationships and husband-wife relationships, there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be things that kind of pull at you. But again, if you rest, as Augustine says, my heart is restless unless it rests in you, O Lord. If we truly take that to heart and have our heart rest in him, he will provide that peace and that joy. And really just, especially in this time of great darkness and trial and unknown with this whole virus thing going, I mean, what a perfect time to reflect this Divine Mercy Sunday, to God's mercy working in our lives in ways that sometimes we don't always expect, and that we plan. And I think to close, maybe what I'll do is I'll read a little bit of a scripture that we had for our wedding. This was a gospel that we used for our wedding, and it's just been kind of an underlying kind of piece of scripture for our life and our family. And it's been really interesting in how it's come into play in various ways throughout that. But I will go ahead and read that, and then we will call it a day. As I see, we're a little over our time. So this is Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. Let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so that's been kind of a neat scripture that's popped in throughout, in various ways throughout a relationship and through our life. And so we just wish everybody a really good Divine Mercy Sunday. Hopefully you can take some time to reflect, on God's goodness, and really reflect on how he's working in your lives and maybe what journeys he's wanting to bring you through. And I just pray for, our parish and our communities and our churches locally here, especially during these trials and these trying times. And we just hope to see maybe you around at St. Mary's. Again, like Heather mentioned, that's our home parish. We're pretty active within the church there. And so we'd love to run across you. If you see this video, mention it to us. If you've got questions or ever want to, connect, we'd love to connect with you. So have a great Divine Mercy Sunday, and thank you for listening to our story.
God bless you.